Sometimes the smallest act of kindness becomes the greatest story you never expected to hear. Henry Collins whispered to himself as he stepped onto the frost-lined porch, the early morning light scattering pale gold across his quiet Maine neighborhood, the air crisp enough to see his breath curl and fade into the soft, muted gray sky. At 68, his back curved from decades of working in the shipyards and long winters spent alone, yet his eyes carried a steady warmth, a patience cultivated from years of enduring solitude and loss. From the edge of the yard, Max, the 6-year-old German shepherd he had been feeding for months, sat perfectly still, his amber eyes glinting with that sharp, almost human intelligence that made Henry feel as if the dog understood more than anyone else ever could. Each morning, Henry had tossed a bit of leftover chicken or a slice of bread toward Max, the dog sniffing, pawing gently, waiting for the silent signal to eat, a ritual that had grown into their quiet bond over time. The crunch of frost under Henry's worn boots mingled with the distant call of a crow, and for a moment, the world held its breath with him. Today, Max nudged the front door with his nose, and then turned, glancing back at Henry as if insisting he follow, tail low, ears alert. The old man's heart skipped a beat. He had come to recognize these subtle gestures. The way Max's body tensed slightly when sensing something unusual, the way his ears twitched at sounds Henry could not hear. Curiosity sparked. Henry followed Max down the narrow path behind the house, where the snow had begun to gather in soft, uneven mounds, each step releasing a faint scent of pine and damp earth. Max paused at the base of the largest oak, pawing lightly at a mound of fresh snow, then dug briefly before revealing a small, neatly wrapped package tied with a frayed ribbon, partially dusted with frost. Henry knelt slowly, the cold seeping through his gloves, and lifted the package, feeling the weight, unfamiliar and slightly warm, as if it carried its own heartbeat. With trembling fingers, he untied the ribbon, revealing a folded piece of heavy parchment and a small, aged key stamped with intricate letters he did not immediately recognize. The note, written in careful, looping script, spoke of gratitude, of unseen eyes, watching acts of quiet generosity, of rewards reserved for those who give without expecting. A warmth surged in Henry's chest, mingling with the sudden sting of tears he had long held back. Memories of lost love, the lonely dinners, the quiet evenings by the fire with no one to share them with, all washed over him in a single wave. Max leaned against his leg, head tilted, as if acknowledging the miracle that had just unfolded. The bond between man and dog deepened beyond words. Henry pressed the key to his lips, exhaling slowly, realizing that the months of simple kindness had returned to him in the most profound way imaginable, the snow falling gently around them, the pale sunlight catching on the icy branches, as if the world itself paused to honor that moment of pure, unspoken connection. Henry carefully folded the note and placed the key into the inside pocket of his worn wool coat, the fabric frayed at the cuffs, the cold biting through its thin layers, but somehow dulled by the warmth spreading in his chest. Max pressed close to his side, tail brushing against Henry's leg, the soft crunch of snow under their feet marking a rhythm that matched the quickening beat in his heart. The key felt heavier than its metal should have, as if it carried the weight of untold stories and the patience of months waiting for him to notice. Henry followed Max down the narrow path toward the old pier at the edge of the frozen lake, where the ice reflected the pale blue of a sky just beginning to lighten with the promise of morning. The wooden planks were slick with frost, and Henry moved cautiously, each step measured, listening to the gentle creak of the wood beneath him. Max stopped suddenly, ears high and alert, nose twitching toward a small, weathered boathouse tucked into the edge of the trees, its paint faded to a soft gray and windows frosted over, catching the first pale sunlight like shards of glass. Henry approached slowly, hand resting on Max's thick fur as if seeking guidance from the dog who had led him here, his breath forming small clouds that lingered in the frigid air. Inside, the boathouse smelled faintly of cedar and cold water, dust motes dancing in the streams of sunlight that found their way through cracked panes. Henry sat down, the key on a rickety table, and knelt to inspect it further, noticing faint etchings along the metal that he had not seen before, patterns that hinted at something more than just a lock, something carefully hidden for decades, waiting for the right hands. Max wandered to the corner, sniffing, and pressed his nose against a section of floor that gave slightly beneath his weight, the subtle shift making Henry lean closer. There, beneath the loose boards, lay a small wooden box, intricately carved, the lid slightly warped with age but still secure. Henry lifted it carefully, hands steady despite the excitement rising in his chest, and inside, he discovered a collection of letters tied with silk ribbon, a small silver locket, and a photograph of a young family smiling on the same lakefront where he now stood, a warmth blooming in his chest that mingled with the cold, sharp clarity of the winter air. Each letter told a story of hope, gratitude, and generosity, words written decades ago that somehow reached across time to meet him here, and Henry felt tears gather, unbidden, as the weight of history and kindness settled over him. Max leaned against him, a quiet companion in the shared awe of discovery, the dog's amber eyes reflecting the soft light like candles flickering in a hushed room. Henry took a deep breath, inhaling the mingling scents of pine, ice, and aged paper, realizing that the simple acts of care he had given so freely had returned multiplied, not in material wealth alone, but in the profound gift of connection, memory, and understanding that filled the room. And he whispered softly to Max, his voice nearly lost to the winter wind, thanking the dog for leading him not just to the quay, but to a moment of grace that would linger in his heart long after the snow melted. Henry stepped back from the wooden box, letting the soft morning light fill the boathouse, each dust mote glinting like tiny stars suspended in the air, and he felt a quiet reverence settle over him as Max nudged his hand with a gentle, insistent pressure, urging him to continue exploring. The floorboards beneath his boots creaked faintly, echoing the subtle rhythm of the wind whispering through the cracks in the aged walls, carrying the mingled scent of pine, cold water, and the faint tang of history. Henry's fingers traced the intricate carvings on the lid once more, noticing patterns that seemed to tell a story all their own, each line and curve connecting past to present, a tapestry of generosity and faith waiting for the right eyes to see it. With careful, deliberate movements, he lifted more of the hidden compartments within the boathouse, revealing additional bundles of letters, small trinkets, and a delicate hand-carved whistle, each item carrying a fragment of the lives that had touched this place long ago. Max circled, alert, tail low and eyes bright, his paws tapping lightly on the frosted wood, guiding Henry toward a final corner where a faint glow of sunlight caught the edge of a small, brass-bound chest. Kneeling, Henry felt the chill of the metal beneath his gloves, the texture smooth yet warm from the sun, and as he opened it, he discovered a collection of faded photographs, maps with cryptic markings, and a folded certificate of ownership, evidence of a legacy long hidden from the world. His breath hitched, not from cold, but from the weight of realization that the kindness he had shown to Max had brought him here, to a moment of quiet revelation that felt like the culmination of all his years of solitude. The photographs showed families smiling by this very lake, children playing under trees whose limbs now stretched gnarled and bare in winter, and he understood the stories behind each object, the care and thought poured into them decades ago, waiting to meet a heart like his. Max rested his head against Henry's knee, his amber eyes calm yet vigilant, as if to remind him that the true gift was not only the tangible items but the connection, the bridge between past and present, man and dog, loneliness and hope. Henry inhaled deeply, the crisp air filling his lungs, and he felt an unfamiliar lightness in his chest, a gentle lifting of the weight that had settled over him for so many years, as if the lake itself exhaled through the thin frost of the morning. He looked down at Max, gratitude shining in his eyes, and whispered softly, a confession meant only for his companion, that every moment spent caring, every simple act of devotion, had led to this unspoken miracle. The sun climbed slowly, brushing the ice with pale gold, illuminating the hidden treasures and the dust-laden corners. And Henry understood, in the deepest part of his heart, that he was no longer alone, that his life had intersected with the threads of countless others, and that in this quiet, frost-kissed boathouse, amidst the echoes of laughter and the scent of pine and paper, he had found a kind of belonging he had long thought impossible, a story woven by acts of love and trust that transcended time itself. Henry rose slowly from the boathouse floor, Max following closely, the dog's paws pressing softly into the frost, as if guiding him toward a deeper understanding. Each step leaving faint impressions in the snow that sparkled in the morning light like scattered diamonds. The chill in the air carried the faint scent of pine resin and the icy lake water, mingling with the warmth that lingered in Henry's chest, a quiet reminder of the moment that had unfolded just minutes ago. He moved toward the doorway, pausing to glance back at the treasure-laden corners, the letters, photographs, and trinkets still bathed in a soft shaft of sunlight that filtered through the cracked windows, illuminating every detail with a gentle golden hue. Max nudged his side, amber eyes bright and full of anticipation, and together they stepped out onto the narrow pier, the boards creaking under the weight of their combined presence, the frozen lake stretching ahead like a vast mirror reflecting the pale sky and the bare branches of the surrounding trees. Henry inhaled deeply, the cold air filling his lungs and clearing his mind, and he felt a profound sense of connection, not only to the dog by his side, but to the invisible hands of those who had placed their trust and care into the hidden objects he had discovered. Each item told a story of love, generosity, and hope, and Henry felt the weight of those stories settle over him, mingling with his own long-held memories of solitude and quiet acts of kindness. He ran a gloved hand along Max's back, feeling the warmth beneath the thick fur, and whispered softly about the bond they shared, a bond forged not by words but by patience, trust, and small gestures repeated day after day. The wind rose slightly, carrying a delicate shiver through the trees, and Henry noticed the soft sparkle of frost clinging to the branches, each tiny crystal catching the light like a secret signal. A gentle reminder that beauty and magic often hid in plain sight. He walked to the edge of the pier, peering over the icy surface, and felt a wave of gratitude wash over him, understanding that the true gift he had received was not simply the contents of the boathouse, but the awakening of hope and the affirmation that kindness, even in the smallest acts, could ripple across time to return in ways he had never imagined. Max sat patiently at his side, ears twitching at the distant calls of waterfowl, and Henry leaned against the weathered railing, letting the moment settle around him. The stillness of the lake, the crisp clarity of the winter morning, and the steady presence of his loyal companion, creating a quiet sanctuary of peace and reflection. He thought of the days ahead, of letters to read, photographs to study, and the small rituals that would allow him to honor the lives captured in those treasures, and a soft smile lifted his lips, the corners of his eyes crinkling with an unexpected lightness. Max shifted slightly, resting his head on Henry's boot, and together they stood there for a long moment, two lives intertwined by patience, care, and an unspoken understanding that sometimes the simplest acts could lead to the most profound revelations, as the lake mirrored the sky above, endless and still, holding the promise of warmth, connection, and a story that would linger in their hearts for all the seasons to come. Henry spent the next hour carefully examining each photograph and letter, Max sitting patiently beside him, the dog's warm presence grounding him as he traced the faded ink and worn edges with gentle fingers. The air inside the boathouse held a quiet stillness, broken only by the soft whistle of wind through the cracks in the weathered boards and the occasional rattle of a loose shutter swaying against its hinge. Henry read aloud passages from the letters, the words echoing softly in the empty space, stories of gratitude, small acts of kindness, and whispered hopes that had been sent across decades, each sentence weaving a connection between the lives of strangers and his own lonely journey. Max tilted his head with every inflection, as if understanding the weight of each word, his amber eyes reflecting a patient intelligence that reminded Henry of the silent companionship they had built together. Outside, the lake shimmered beneath a thin layer of ice, the early sun casting long shadows that danced over the snow-dusted ground, illuminating the subtle textures of frost on pine needles and the delicate patterns etched into the wooden planks of the pier. Henry felt a stirring of warmth in his chest as he imagined the people who had written these letters, their hands long gone, yet their voices resonating through time to reach him in this exact moment. He moved to the small chest, opening each compartment in turn, discovering trinkets carefully stored, a silver locket that held a miniature portrait of a smiling child, a pocket watch frozen at a moment in time, and small carved figurines that had been passed down with love and care. Max sniffed each item, nudging them gently with his nose, signaling approval, and Henry could not help but smile, a tear sliding down his cheek as he realized that this quiet dog had led him not just to material objects, but to a profound understanding of legacy, empathy, and the unseen ways that acts of generosity ripple across lives. The cold air bit at his cheeks, but he barely noticed, absorbed entirely by the soft hum of reflection and connection, the gentle rhythm of the dog's breathing and the whisper of the wind through the trees creating a sense of peace that Henry had not felt in decades. He rose and stepped toward the open doorway, the sunlight warming his back as he gazed across the frozen lake, seeing in the distant shoreline the outline of trees and the subtle glint of snow on branches, a living canvas of memory and hope. Max pressed close, head resting against Henry's leg, and together they walked to the edge of the pier, feeling the strength of companionship and the quiet miracle of discovery that had unfolded not through grand gestures or loud announcements, but through patience, attention, and the steady, unspoken bond between a man and the dog who had trusted him and guided him to this moment of clarity, gratitude, and the profound, gentle realization that kindness, once given, finds its way home. Henry lingered on the pier for several moments, feeling the crisp winter air brush against his face as the sunlight slowly climbed higher, casting long, pale shadows across the ice and the frosted boards beneath his boots. Max shifted beside him, tail brushing against Henry's leg in a familiar rhythm, a quiet companion who had led him through months of small, patient acts into this unfolding moment of discovery. Henry held the small silver locket in his gloved hands, turning it gently to catch the light, and inside he saw the miniature portrait of a child whose smile seemed impossibly bright against the muted colors of winter, a reminder of the human warmth that could endure across generations. The letters spread around him on the table whispered stories in his mind, voices of gratitude and care echoing faintly in the quiet boathouse, filling the empty space with the invisible presence of lives he would never meet, yet somehow felt intimately connected to. He breathed slowly, the icy air filling his lungs with clarity and focus, and he could feel the pulse of the lake beneath the thin sheet of ice, a rhythm that matched the quiet, steady beat of his own heart as he contemplated the layers of kindness that had been built into this moment, waiting for recognition. Each photograph, each handwritten note, each carved trinket seemed to speak of patience, of attention, of the subtle ways human and canine lives could intersect to produce something larger than either could accomplish alone. Henry looked down at Max, amber eyes bright with quiet understanding, and he whispered softly, the words barely audible over the gentle creak of the boathouse, that he could never have imagined the depths of connection that patience and care could yield. The sun glinted off the frost on the railings and the frozen water, illuminating the intricate textures of ice crystals and wood grain in a way that made every detail seem deliberate, as if the world itself conspired to mark this day as special. Henry carefully repacked the letters and trinkets into their compartments, ensuring that each item was preserved as it had been, feeling a sense of reverence for the stories contained within and the unseen hands that had placed them there. Max nudged him again, ears pricked, signaling it was time to move, and together they walked along the edge of the pier, the faint crunch of snow underfoot punctuating the stillness, a reminder that life continued beyond this quiet haven. Henry paused to look across the lake once more, noting the way the thin ice shimmered in the soft morning light, reflecting the bare trees like dark silhouettes against the sky, and he felt a profound sense of peace settle over him, a reassurance that small, consistent acts of care and attention could ripple outward to touch lives in ways he had never anticipated. Max pressed closer, and Henry placed a hand on the dog's thick fur, feeling the warmth, the steady presence, and the reminder that even in the coldest, most silent mornings, companionship and trust could illuminate the path forward. As the wind carried the faint scent of pine and distant water, Henry understood that this day, like so many of the quiet mornings before, held within it a quiet miracle, a gentle confirmation that the life he had led, full of patience, care, and small acts of kindness had not gone unnoticed, and that the bond between him and Max would continue to guide him through the days to come, steady, unwavering, and full of promise. Henry stepped off the pier, Max padding closely beside him, their breaths forming small clouds that drifted into the crisp winter air, the sound of ice shifting gently on the lake below, and the distant rustle of trees composing a quiet symphony. The sun had risen further, casting a soft golden light across the landscape, turning each snow-dusted branch into a delicate sculpture that seemed to shimmer with life. Henry carried the small chest and letters carefully, feeling the weight of each story in his hands, aware of the invisible connections that had led him here, and a warmth spread through his chest as he considered the ripple effect of simple acts of care. Max paused to sniff at a clump of pine needles, ears flicking at a faint rustle, and Henry smiled, understanding that every detail of this winter morning, every sound, every shift of light, seemed orchestrated to reveal the quiet magic of the day. He set the chest down inside the boathouse again, arranging the letters and trinkets with deliberate care, tracing the contours of carvings with gentle fingers, feeling a resonance that went beyond the material, a connection to people long gone who had poured hope and attention into these small objects. Max pressed against his leg, head resting lightly, and Henry took a deep breath, feeling the cold air fill his lungs and clear his mind, bringing with it a sense of clarity and calm that had eluded him for decades. The boathouse, though modest and weathered, felt like a sanctuary, its wooden walls absorbing the light and sound, amplifying the quiet presence of the past and the present, the dog and the man, and the stories they shared silently. Henry stepped to the doorway, looking out over the lake, noting the thin sheet of ice glinting in the sunlight, the gentle sway of reeds, the distant call of a bird that echoed faintly across the frozen water, and he felt a profound sense of gratitude for the journey that had brought him here, for the patient months of feeding and caring, and for the guidance of Max, whose instincts and loyalty had revealed more than Henry could have imagined. He knelt to brush the snow from a small stone, finding an engraving he had not noticed before, a simple mark that seemed like a signature from someone unseen, a reminder that even in quiet, overlooked moments, there was significance and purpose. Max shifted, nudging Henry's hand, and he laughed softly, a sound that mingled with the wind and the faint creak of the boathouse, a release of tension built over years of solitude. Henry rose, feeling the crisp air invigorate him, and looked across the lake once more, the landscape calm and infinite, knowing that the day had delivered not just physical treasures, but an awakening, a gentle confirmation that his life, his patience, and his care had mattered, and that the bond he shared with Max was a bridge between past, present, and the quiet miracles that occur when kindness is given freely. Henry settled onto the worn wooden bench inside the boathouse, Max curling at his feet, the soft padding of his paws against the floor a comforting rhythm that matched the gentle creak of the boards and the whisper of wind through the cracks. The letters and trinkets lay neatly arranged on the table before him, each one a story, a thread connecting past lives to his own, and he traced the edges of the photographs with a careful touch, noting the warmth in the smiles frozen in time and the thoughtful details preserved through decades. The sunlight shifted slowly, casting long, soft shadows across the floor, illuminating dust motes that floated lazily, and Henry allowed himself to lean back, closing his eyes briefly to savor the quiet, the sensation of stillness that was almost tangible. In the icy air, Max stirred, lifting his head and gazing toward the small door, ears pricked, alert to a sound Henry could not hear, and in that moment, he felt the depth of trust and understanding between them, the bond forged through months of patience, feeding, and companionship. Henry opened another letter, the delicate paper crackling softly, and read words of gratitude from someone long gone, an acknowledgement of small, consistent acts of kindness that had traveled across time to find him, and he felt a surge of warmth, a quiet joy that settled deep into his chest. The boathouse, modest and unassuming, had transformed into a sanctuary of reflection, where the stories of the past intertwined seamlessly with the life he was living now, and he could sense the invisible threads of connection that wove through each item, linking him to moments and people he had never met, yet felt intimately familiar. He glanced down at Max, amber eyes steady and intelligent, and whispered in a low tone of appreciation, fingers resting on the thick fur, feeling the steady pulse of life, the unspoken guidance, the silent acknowledgement of their shared journey. Outside, the lake reflected the shifting clouds, the frost on the shore glinting like tiny mirrors, and Henry felt the expansive calm settle over him. The weight of loneliness lifted, replaced by the quiet assurance that acts of care, no matter how small, held the power to ripple outward, returning in forms both unexpected and profound. The wind carried a faint, crisp scent of pine and water, brushing Henry's cheeks and filling his senses with the clarity of a day unfolding with purpose. And he understood that the bond with Max had guided him not just to physical discoveries, but to an awakening of hope, trust, and patience that would remain with him for all the days ahead. He leaned back further, taking in the soft light that painted the boathouse with gentle gold and shadow, Max resting his head against Henry's boot, tail flicking occasionally in contentment. And for the first time in years, Henry felt the serene completeness of a moment perfectly balanced, a quiet miracle born of steady care, attentive companionship, and the enduring presence of a loyal, perceptive friend by his side. Henry carefully closed the chest, securing each letter and trinket in its place, the sound of the wooden lid settling, echoing softly in the quiet boathouse as the sunlight stretched across the floor, catching dust motes in golden rays that seemed to linger in the air like tiny sparks of memory. Max shifted at his side, tail brushing gently against Henry's leg, eyes alert, ears moving at every subtle sound, as if he were reading the world in ways that Henry could not. Stepping outside, Henry felt the crisp air fill his lungs, sharp with the scent of pine, snow, and the lake, each breath reminding him of the stillness and clarity that winter mornings brought. The lake reflected the pale sky like a mirror, ice forming delicate patterns along the edges that glinted in the soft light, and Henry paused to take it all in, feeling a quiet awe at the beauty that seemed to surround every detail of his small world. Max padded alongside him, occasionally lifting his head to listen, sniffing the faint trails of scent that wind carried across the frozen ground, a constant companion and guide who had brought him to this moment of understanding. Henry traced his fingers along the weathered railing of the pier, feeling the textures of frost and wood beneath his gloves, and let himself reflect on the months of quiet care he had given, the simple meals, the patient presence, and the gentle attention to Max that had now culminated in this profound discovery of connection and history. The soft crunch of snow beneath his boots was the only sound as he walked slowly back toward the boathouse, Max close at his side, and Henry felt a wave of gratitude that seemed to settle over him in layers, mingling with memories of solitude, acts of kindness, and the unexpected return of that care in the form of stories, treasures, and the subtle, persistent miracle of trust. He paused to look at Max, amber eyes glinting in the morning light, and Henry felt a deep, unspoken understanding between them, a recognition that this bond, formed in patience and attention, was a rare and enduring gift. As the sun continued to rise, casting soft, golden shadows across the landscape, Henry inhaled the fresh winter air, feeling it fill not only his lungs but his spirit, grounding him in the quiet certainty that life, even in its most solitary moments, had a way of weaving kindness into unexpected revelations. He stood at the edge of the pier, hands resting on the rail, watching the lake shimmer under the thin sheet of ice. And in that moment, he understood that every patient act, every quiet gesture of care, had led to a fuller, richer understanding of life, trust, and the enduring presence of a loyal companion. Max pressed gently against his leg, tail swishing in quiet contentment, and Henry felt the weight of years lift slightly, replaced by a profound sense of peace and belonging, knowing that the bonds formed through patience and kindness would guide him forward, carrying the warmth of this winter morning, the lessons of the past, and the gentle miracle of a loyal friend by his side. Henry lingered on the pier as the morning light deepened, the pale sun casting long, gentle shadows across the frozen lake, each ripple of ice reflecting the subtle brilliance of winter. Max sat attentively beside him, ears twitching at distant, faint sounds of birds or rustling branches, a quiet sentinel in the stillness. Henry's fingers brushed along the smooth wood of the railing, feeling the textured frost beneath his gloves, a reminder of the season's chill and the clarity it brought to his thoughts. The chest, now safely closed and tucked beside him, seemed to radiate a quiet significance, as though it carried not just objects but the very essence of past kindness and human connection. Henry's eyes traced the patterns of frost on the surrounding trees, the intricate latticework of ice forming delicate filigree against the muted blues and grays of the landscape, and he felt an unexpected sense of calm, as if the world itself had paused to allow him a moment of reflection. Max nudged his leg softly, a gentle reminder of the bond between them, and Henry bent to scratch behind the dog's ears, feeling the thick warmth of fur beneath his fingers, a grounding presence amidst the winter quiet. The letters and photographs he had examined earlier played through his mind like a soft echo, the words and images resonating with his own memories of solitude, perseverance, and the small acts of care that had brought him here. He inhaled deeply, the cold air filling his lungs and clearing his mind, and he considered how every patient gesture, every small offering of attention and care had accumulated over time, culminating in this profound experience of understanding and gratitude. The gentle lapping of the lake beneath the ice, the distant sound of wind moving through the bare branches, and the subtle crunch of snow beneath his boots all combined to create a symphony of quiet presence, a backdrop for contemplation and acknowledgement of the miracles found in ordinary, consistent kindness. Henry looked down at Max, amber eyes bright and knowing, and whispered softly, feeling the words settle into the crisp air, a meditation on trust, patience, and the quiet, persistent rewards that come to those who give without expectation. He rose slowly, taking in the breadth of the frozen expanse, the sunlight shimmering across the lake, highlighting the delicate patterns of ice and snow, and felt a profound connection not only to the tangible treasures he had discovered, but also to the unseen threads of human care and devotion that had guided him to this very place. Max pressed close, tail brushing Henry's boot, and together they stood at the edge of the pier, letting the stillness envelop them, aware of the gentle miracle of presence, the enduring power of kindness, and the simple truth that life, when observed with attention and heart, continually reveals moments of grace and connection that sustain the soul through even the coldest and quietest of days. Henry lingered by the edge of the frozen lake, Max seated faithfully at his side, the dog's breath rising in faint clouds that shimmered in the pale winter sunlight. Each step Henry took along the frost-covered pier seemed deliberate, as if the ice and wood beneath him marked the rhythm of reflection and understanding, carrying the weight of months filled with patient care and quiet companionship. The letters and trinkets he had discovered earlier lay neatly packed in the chest inside the boathouse, each item a testament to the kindness and thoughtfulness of people long gone, their presence lingering in the quiet space like a gentle hum of memory. Henry ran a gloved hand along the railing, feeling the delicate frost that had settled overnight, each crystal catching the sun and sparkling like 1,000 tiny stars, and he thought of the countless moments he had spent feeding Max, tossing scraps, and speaking softly, moments that had seemed ordinary at the time, but now revealed themselves as the foundation of an unexpected miracle. Max nudged his hand gently, amber eyes steady and intelligent, as if affirming the significance of their journey together, and Henry felt a deep connection, not only to the dog by his side, but to the invisible threads of care and attention that had guided him to this place. The lake stretched out before them, a quiet expanse of glass and ice reflecting the muted colors of the winter sky, and Henry inhaled deeply, savoring the sharp, clean air that filled his lungs with clarity and calm. The distant sound of a crow and the subtle whisper of wind through the bare branches reminded him of the stillness around him, a gentle invitation to consider the ways that small acts of kindness resonate across time and space. Henry shifted, brushing snow from his coat and letting his gaze travel across the shimmering surface of the lake, noting the intricate patterns of frost and the soft shadows that danced in the early sunlight, a reminder that beauty often hides in the details and patience brings reward in ways unseen until the right moment. Max leaned closer, tail flicking lazily, and Henry smiled, feeling warmth bloom in his chest, a subtle echo of gratitude and fulfillment that spread through every part of him. The chill of winter seemed less harsh, softened by the presence of the dog and the knowledge that his own acts of care had borne fruit, returning to him in ways that were both tangible and profoundly emotional. Henry's eyes lingered on the horizon, where the ice met the pale sky, and he understood that this day, like so many quiet mornings before it, held a significance beyond immediate comprehension, a quiet miracle built from patience, attention, and the enduring bond between a man and his loyal companion. He reached down to scratch Max's ears, feeling the warmth beneath the thick fur, and whispered softly about the journey they had shared, about the trust and guidance that had led him to uncover stories, treasures, and a gentle affirmation that life, when approached with kindness and patience, rewards in ways both unexpected and profoundly moving, leaving a sense of peace and connection that would linger long after the snow had melted and the lake had returned to its still, reflective calm. Henry lingered on the edge of the pier, Max resting at his feet, the dog's fur catching the soft golden light of late morning as the sun climbed higher, scattering warmth across the frost-covered landscape. Henry's eyes traced the patterns of ice along the lake's edge, each crack and ripple reflecting the pale blue of the sky above and the bare, snow-dusted trees lining the shore. He felt the quiet depth of the morning, the kind of stillness that wrapped around him like a familiar blanket, carrying with it the weight of reflection and understanding. The chest, safely stowed back in the boathouse, seemed to hum with significance, a repository of stories and memories that stretched across generations, each letter and trinket a testament to care and the quiet impact of thoughtful gestures. Henry ran his gloved fingers along the railing, brushing off frost, feeling the rough grain of wood beneath, and he thought about the months he had spent feeding Max, the repeated, patient acts of kindness that had grown into a bond strong enough to guide him to this discovery. Max lifted his head, ears pricked, tail flicking lazily, as if to remind Henry that presence, patience, and attention had their own voice and wisdom. The air carried the faint scent of pine, the icy tang of the lake, and the subtle warmth of sunlight, and Henry inhaled deeply, feeling clarity and calm fill his chest. He turned to watch the small boathouse, its weathered wood and frosted windows standing as a quiet witness to time and care, and he realized that the space itself had become a mirror for reflection, connecting past actions with present awareness. Henry thought of the people whose lives intersected with these treasures, the letters written with thoughtfulness and care, their voices carried across decades, reaching him through the dog who had known the way. The lake, still and reflective, held the sky and surrounding trees like a painting, and Henry could feel the layers of connection settle gently around him, a sense of continuity and belonging that went beyond the physical objects he had uncovered. He bent to scratch Max behind the ears, feeling warmth and life beneath the thick fur, and whispered softly about the trust and guidance that had led them here, a bond built in silence, but understood in depth. The cold air brushed his cheeks, yet he felt an inner warmth that radiated through him, a quiet satisfaction born of understanding that small, consistent acts of care return in unexpected ways, sometimes decades later, and often in forms more profound than he could have imagined. Standing, Henry surveyed the frozen expanse once more, the gentle shifting of light across ice and snow, the soft murmur of wind through pine needles, and he understood that the day had revealed not merely material treasures, but a living testament to patience, kindness, and the enduring bond between a man and the dog who had guided him to this quiet, miraculous understanding. A gift of presence and trust that would remain with him long after the lake had melted and the frost had receded. Henry stood at the very edge of the pier, the frozen lake stretching out before him like a sheet of glass kissed by the pale morning sun, the soft glint of ice reflecting shards of light across the snow-dusted boards beneath his feet. Max shifted slightly at his side, tail sweeping lazily against Henry's leg, eyes bright with alert intelligence, a reminder that their bond had been forged not by grand gestures, but by months of quiet care, patience, and consistent attention. The boathouse behind him stood quietly, weathered and frost-covered, a sanctuary that now held more than physical treasures. It carried stories, memories, and the echo of kindness passed down across generations. Henry inhaled deeply, the crisp air filling his lungs and carrying the faint scent of pine and the icy tang of the lake, and he felt a profound clarity settling in his chest, a sense of completeness that had been absent for far too many winters. He knelt briefly to run his gloved hand along the railing, the rough grains softened by frost, contemplating how small acts, repeated with care, had rippled across time to arrive at this moment, a revelation not only of objects and letters, but of enduring human connection. Max leaned into him, nudging gently with his head, and Henry smiled, pressing his hand against the dog's thick fur, feeling warmth, loyalty, and guidance in every breath and movement. The sun climbed higher, casting a golden glow across the icy surface of the lake, illuminating subtle ripples and patterns, shadows stretching across snow-laden branches, and Henry marveled at the stillness, the calm, the quiet reflection that allowed him to see not just what was before him, but the intricate weave of life, kindness, and trust that had led him here. He turned slightly, looking back toward the boathouse, imagining the hands that had left letters and trinkets, imagining their intention, patience, and hope, and a soft smile tugged at his lips, the weight of solitude lifted by the realization that even in quiet, unnoticed moments, generosity and care carry forward in ways one cannot always predict. Henry exhaled slowly, letting the cold air fill his chest and flow out again, a rhythm matching the subtle crackling of ice beneath the pier, and he felt the fullness of gratitude, of being part of a story larger than his own. Max shifted, standing and stretching, and Henry followed suit, both gazing out at the lake, the shimmering ice, the bare trees, and the pale sky, absorbing the simple perfection of the moment. He whispered softly to Max, words carried away by the wind, acknowledging the journey they had taken together, the trust and quiet courage that had guided them, and feeling in every sense that the smallest gestures, patience, attention, and unwavering kindness can create ripples across time that return in the form of understanding, peace, and the unspoken miracles that shape a life. Standing shoulder to shoulder with his loyal companion, Henry felt the embrace of clarity and fulfillment, the calm certainty that moments like these, forged in silence and care, leave enduring marks on the soul, and he understood that the journey had transformed him, revealing a truth both simple and profound. Kindness, once given, finds its way home.